figuring this out. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen, and I'm going to go ahead and start. All right, so for this presentation, it's called A Living Figure in His Mind, and I wanted to look at Claude's paper on Joan of Arc and her trial in one of ours. This can feel like kind of an unimportant moment near the beginning of Claude's story, but after closer inspection, this carries far more weight. Both Joan of Arc and Claude love the French land, have religious inclinations that are different from others around them, and both die as martyrs in France. Cather draws clear parallels between Joan of Arc and Claude Wheeler, the farm boy, constructing Claude as a modern Joan of Arc figure. So Joan of Arc was born in 1412 in Domremy on the day of the Feast of the Epiphany in the middle of the 100 Years' War. Her family wasn't particularly rich, but they were comfortably well off, and as a child, Joan watched her family's sheep and plowed the fields. She was a serious young person who made pilgrimages most Saturdays to the Hermitage of Notre Dame de Bourmont and seemed more or less ordinary. While she didn't have many educational opportunities, Joan knew what was happening in her beloved country. In 1425, Joan heard the first voices she claimed to be from God. These voices told her to go and fight to free the French people from the English. So Joan left home and rose to the head of the army. Many of the French people grew to love her. It was believed she was fulfilling prophecies. After many battles at Compiègne, Joan was captured in battle and taken prisoner by the Burgundians, who handed her over to the English, and she was put to trial at Rouen. Eventually, she was convicted and burned to death at the Old Market in Rouen in 1431. Joan was rehabilitated, and her conviction was nullified in a posthumous trial 25 years later. After her death, Joan of Arc became a legendary political and religious figure. She was canonized as a saint in the Roman Catholic Church in 1920 amidst celebration. Joan of Arc has been used as a political figure many times, the image of her leading troops in battle resonating with the French people as a symbol of patriotism. During World War I, Joan became a propaganda figure on posters, asking the United States to help her people in this war just as she helped them in her time. So back to one of ours. As Claude studies Joan, he feels a connection to her that borders on spiritual. Claude is a man who wants to transcend the ordinariness of everyday life. He longs for something, and Joan symbolizes and personifies that something indescribable and intangible. The section on Joan is short, but draws a clear connection between Claude's childhood hero and his future. Joan of Arc had a clear love of France and its people, otherwise she wouldn't have felt called to lead the armies and save France. She wouldn't have put up with fighting, living on the battlefield, or the torture of death had she not had strong convictions and love for France. She stayed true to these even to the end because she knew the French people needed her as a symbol of strength. Joan was so charismatic that the Burgundians and the English feared she was using witchcraft to win over the people, especially the king. While France was split in terms of loyalties, Joan of Arc was a compelling mythical figure to all the French people. Her vision of a unified France carried her through many difficulties and inspired others around her. The second Claude sees the coast of France, he is smitten. He grows to love the French land as much as he loves his native Nebraska, if not more, since France has no bad memories attached to it. Claude finds his feelings mirrored exactly in the landscape of France. He finds himself there. And Claude learns to love the French people he meets, Madame Joubert, the children, Mademoiselle Olive. Claude's views of Joan of Arc also begin to shift from this childhood figure he has to Joan the mystic, who shows Claude the something he has longed for. Of the two characters, Joan is the more obviously religious. She was extremely pious from a young age and loved to hear the ringing of the church bells. Joan left her home and went to battle because she believed God had called her to lead the French armies and unify the country. She declared she had seen and heard various saints and God himself tell her that she would be the one to save France. And Claude is unsure where he stands when it comes to religion. His mother is deeply religious and the rest of his family appear to have faith, but he has a spiritual crisis. He has different views of people and God than those around him. But it's in France that Claude shows that he does have religious thoughts and believes in some sort of God. He visits these Saint Juan Abbey in Rouen and has a few private moments of contemplation. Joan here is a figure in Claude's mind, almost like a patron saint to him, so he can't ignore where this happens. It's through Joan that Claude learns that he can die for an ideal, that his life is not without meaning. And after he reconciles with the idea of death, he uses it to bargain with a higher power for David's life. Claude speaks to any god that will listen. But it turns out his prayer goes unanswered. Both he and David die, and Claude becomes a martyr figure to his mother and Mahalie. Even though Joan of Arc was burned at the stake as a witch and a heretic, she quickly became a hero and a martyr in the eyes of the French people and history. Joan died for an idea that France needed to be saved from England and unified, and that she would be the one to get the job done. Like Joan, Claude dies in France. He dies protecting his men and doing the bravest thing he ever did. He dies for his love of France, his love of his fellow soldiers, and for his belief in that intangible something. He goes on to become like a household saint for Mahalie, as she believes he resides just over the kitchen stove. So in one of ours, Cather drew a clear connection between Claude and Joan of Arc. Both went to war in France, fighting for the freedom of the French people. Both had religious beliefs that set them apart from those around them, and both died in France. Cather sets up Claude as a modern Joan of Arc figure and a martyr of World War I. And there's my works cited. I've had a lot of fun working on this project and doing the research. So thank you.